Tim's, please.
Yeah. All right, you guys, we're back again. We're live. IOPS goes live, episode 16. Sorry for the earlier video. We had shitty Wi-Fi. It is what it is. So we're rebooting this. We're going to restart it, and we're just starting over. Anyway, back again. Welcome back again, Nick.
Hey.
So we're going to start chatting, and it's like we never even chatted, and then go from there.
Okay, I'll pretend I don't know you.
Exactly. Hey.
Hey, nice to meet you.
Right on. Okay, so I know some people are just joining right now. Me and Nick were trying to chat at 1:30 this afternoon, but I live on a reserve and my Wi-Fi is not good during the day because everyone's battling for it. But yeah, whatever. Here we are at night, ready to rock and roll, and we're gonna get right to it. So, Nick, I know when we were talking before, I guess we're just gonna talk like we just started. So, Nick, introduce yourself.
So yeah, I'm Nick Crighton. As it sees the ticker across the line there, I'm the Director of Indigenous Engagement with the Saskatchewan Chamber of Commerce. That's what I do. But where I'm from from Waterhen Lake First Nation, and I live in Regina. But I'm a Cree Scottish man, father, proud father of 4. So yeah, that's it. It's me.
4 kids.
Yeah, I started my relationship. I came in and I became kind of in for First Nations people, we don't like to use the term stepdad, but I came in with 3 kids already, and then my
Oh,
my
okay.
my wife blessed me 10 years after her last one, and we have a 2-year-old. So yeah,
Oh, awesome, man. It's always
yeah,
good.
yep.
You're rich when you have many, many kids.
Oh yeah, it's like they raise you, man. It's I learned lots. I've been with my partner now for 8 years, some time now. Yeah, so
Oh, really?
yeah, it's been good. It's been
Nice.
fun. Yeah, man, it's awesome. Best part of
Nice.
it's what motivates me. What about you? Have any
Yeah.
kids?
Me, yeah, I have one daughter. I wanted more. Just didn't happen.
Oh, there's still time.
The boys can swim, but it's all good. I just haven't found I didn't want to be like the old ways and just have kids everywhere and just, I just kind of figured
I'm sure
yeah.
you probably do diaper drop-offs all around the north. The 20th was
I'm
what the other
here.
day? Yesterday, yeah, 20th. You're probably
Yeah.
dropping off diapers
Daddy's
everywhere.
home. Daddy's
Yeah,
home.
just hit all Treaty 6 and Treaty 10 territory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're gonna go back to usually how my podcasts go. I kind of just feel it out and see how you where you're at, how you got to where you are, and then what your future outlook is. So can you tell us about your past? Like what led you up to where you are? Like where did you grow up?
Where did I grow up? So originally I grew up in Waterhen Lake First Nation. So my parents actually met in Regina. I'll try and
Mm-hmm.
wrap this up quick, but then I was about 2.5 years old. Me and my brother, we moved up to Waterhen Lake, and from Waterhen, about grade 6, moved to Meadow Lake, which is about 35 minutes away from Waterhen, but essentially still close to a lot of family up there. And then after that, after Meadow Lake, I graduated in 2004 and then headed straight to university at the University of Regina, and I've been here for 16 years, I guess. So
Hmm.
yeah, and then lots of jobs. Well, we can talk a little bit about that, but the biggest thing in my life that has always been the number one consistency is working, and I've
Yeah.
always found, growing up poor, that's something I needed. When I had my first job when I was 15, across the street from where I lived, there was this place called Eastside Grocery. It's still there, and that was my first job, and so it was easy for me to start working. I enjoyed it. I needed to make the money to hang out with my friends, and
You're the
that's
baller at 15.
well, I don't know about baller. I think I didn't have any financial
Nick
literacy. I
got
don't even,
paid. Nick got paid.
yeah, I have chip-ins for gas. I could catch a ride with all the buddies. Then
Yeah.
yeah, Nick can chip in for gas, or maybe buy chip in for a 12 pack.
Yeah. So you grew up in the city, or what? Waterhead, you said?
No, I grew up in Waterhen, and then yeah,
Yeah.
about grade 6 in Meadow Lake. So yeah,
Oh,
from grade
metal
6 to
ghetto,
grade
right
12.
on.
Yeah, yeah. So I was there. I mean, it's close, so you go back and forth, right? I still have a lot of family there. My cook, my mushrooms still live up there with
Yeah.
my aunties, and my auntie's actually the chief of Waterhen, and I have other people out there. So yeah, it's been good.
Huh. Got a little hi from Nicole Standing Horn.
Hello.
She's actually got a big she's actually some lady you'd like to connect with. She has a very big following. She has a online business called Neepsy um Herbs and something. Anyway, she's huge, doing big business right now just because of what's going on, and she's a pretty awesome lady. I gotta
What's
get her on
the
the
what
Neepsy.
business?
She'll put it in the link there, Nicole. Put it in the link.
Sweet. Yeah, we'll definitely do.
Actually be perfect for because just exactly how you're engaging with the non-indigenous and indigenous business, right?
Yep.
She'd be perfect for what you're doing.
Right on.
So you grew up, you went to Regina, and
Yes.
then you're there,
Hmm.
and you went to high school. Did you play any sports? You Powell guy?
Yeah, no, that was a big thing for me. So I started playing hockey at a very young age in Waterhen. I learned how to skate in Waterhen. I learned this the same way everybody else learned, was pushing a chair on the rink, and then I fell in love with it. I enjoyed it. I was never the best hockey player, but I played hockey up until I was grade 12, and my
Yeah.
final year was midget aces, our A team. There we were northern provincial champs, but then we came down south to play the southern guys, and I don't know what they feed those farm boys in the south, but they're all 6'6" and 4. Yeah, but no, it was fun. I grew up playing hockey, and that was I still have a lot. I grew up doing the Saskatchewan First Nations summer and winter games, and that was kind
Yeah.
of where I got my connection to sports, and I still have a lot of lifelong. Funny story. I played this my very first friend in university. So being First Nations, going to university in Regina, there wasn't, not that I know of, at the University of Regina. I didn't know anybody in the city. It was too far away, right? A lot of people went to the U of S or other places, and I was on my first day of orientation at the University of Regina, and I played hockey against this guy. His name's Fraser Heathen. He's from Onion Lake. He's a counselor out there, and I didn't like him growing up as a teenager because we got into a couple fights playing. We would play each other against each other in soccer, and we played each other against each other in hockey. And he was the only guy I recognized at the University of
Hmm.
Regina. And even though I kind of chuckled when I saw him, he became kind of one of my closest friends over 16 years ago.
Yeah.
Um, University of Regina, and I actually just chatted with him the other day and got a chance to go about a year or so ago. I went up to Lloydminster and visited with him a little bit, so it was funny.
Those
Yeah,
heathen boys. Yeah, I used to play with them big boys over there, man.
yeah, puck hogs. I like to tease them. They don't do Fraser, anyways. I don't know any other heathen boys, but
Yeah, I played with a buddy of mine named Jeff. He was a beast on the ice. Shout out to Jeff. Anyway, yeah, so then you hit university, and then what were you taking in uni, and how was the university life as a young
well,
indigenous man? I know going through mine because I went to Fanuc
yep,
when it was in Saskatoon there on the Fifth Ave.
yep,
And the reason I went there is because it was all indigenous people, and I felt comfortable around there, and I felt good, and I just felt at home.
yeah. So
And
I
you
felt
went to U of R.
I went to the University of Regina because of they didn't actually offer my program at First Nations University at the time. So I wanted to go to the First Nations University, but I went into arts, but I wanted to go into kinesiology.
Mhm.
So although because First Nations University, Luther, Campion, these are federated colleges underneath the kind of University of Regina umbrella, like
Yeah.
First Nations University itself, I did like taking a lot of classes from there, so I
Yeah.
felt comfortable there as well. So I took like Cree 100 and Cree 101, all of those stuff. I took some business classes there, some communications classes. I like that. I like feeling at home. But at the University of Regina, it was very different in terms of, you know, even when I think I came here, there wasn't even anybody that I remember from my home community living in Regina. Now, kind of we're taking over. There's so many people in Regina from Waterhead. It's awesome to see. So I have some cousins and some aunties that live here as well. So it's cool. But and I also have some younger cousins. I left 16 years ago, and these were all um, young kids when you leave away. But now they're in university, or they've come through First Nations University. So that's awesome to see that they've gone and pursued that. And yeah, it's cool, but it was difficult. Like I said, I walked into my very first class. I remember as a First Nations person
And what
being
year was
shy.
this? First year?
2004, September
Two, oh
2004. So
yeah.
I came in September 2004 when I went. My first class was in a psychology 100 class, and it was an
Yeah.
auditorium full of probably 300 people. And I
Holy
did the
shit.
thing that we all do when we want to be comfortable. I scanned the room, and I was just scanning, looking for another brown face. And then I
Yeah.
saw a brown face, and I was like, "Oh, that's not my brown." So then I went to another, and then saw another brown face. So I sat by that person. I was too shy to say hello. I was very shy at 19. At 18, 19, and I was very introverted. And I had a thick northern native accent that I had to drop, but I working and living around with a lot of white people. I guess I dropped my accent, but it is what it is. And
Yeah.
that was it, it was difficult. It was hard. You missed home. You're far from home, from your home community. And at the time, Regina was the big city for me. I never really came to Regina, right? Because as you're, familiar, Saskatoon was a lot closer. Even going to Edmonton was a lot closer. So Regina wasn't a place, yeah, I was born here. It's where my parents met, but I never had no reason to come to Regina. So yeah, I came here. I actually followed my the girl I was dating in high school. So she went to University of Regina, and we were together in high school, and so I just kind of followed her at the U of R, and yeah, that's where it is. And but yeah, no, it was I feel like I'm talking long here, Nathan, but I had a lot of great experiences at the university. I met a
I'm
lot
gonna
of cool
stop you
people,
right
so
there, man, and
go
you
for it.
can just go and go and go and keep talking, man. Because the less I have to talk and ask you questions, I'd rather hear your whole story, right? Because that's what it's all about, man. Is sharing your
Definitely.
story, your experience. Because the goal is of these podcasts is to inspire and motivate other people to say, "Wow, look at this guy's story. Look what he did." And if they ever get into a situation like you, then they can come back and maybe get tidbits from you. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So talk
absolutely.
away, man. Go hard. No, there's no
Awesome.
the less I have to talk, the better, I say.
Okay, right on. So yeah, no, that was the big thing. The big thing I remember was it was difficult. It was difficult being afar from home. It was difficult. Um, I wanted to come back so many times. My very first summer, I remember after my first year university, I went and worked with the Meadow Lake Tribal Council, and again, I felt a little bit more comfortable. But it
Hmm.
makes me miss home. I don't get home like I should. I mean, it is 6 hours, but it's hard to get home. I do want
That's a
to
long way,
go home.
man, just to go back to the res and
You
visit.
need to have well, my parents live in Meadow, but and my sister as well.
Yeah.
But you do have to have a long weekend. Do you know what I mean? Because it is a
Yeah,
full day.
that's a
It's a
that's
full
a
day of
full day of
driving.
driving, man, especially when
And
you
even
got
though
kids.
when you drive kind of fast in between
Yeah.
Saskatoon and Regina, the 2 hours to get there, it's
Yeah.
still a bit of a pain. But is what it is. I think it's important to go home. My older brother's really good at staying connected with family. But going back to my experience, it was difficult because I think around 2004, all of that kind of stuff, the having even indigenous representation on students unions or indigenous or First Nations representations at the University of Regina, there's still a lot of stigmas around that. There's still a lot of myths and misconceptions. I always felt very lonely in my classes, especially when I got into my kinesiology classes, and i
Hmm.
didn't feel i didn't feel fully equipped in terms of having the knowledge I have today to be able to defend some stuff. So quite often we talked about sports, or we talked about rural sports, and or I remember specifically having a conversation, and I brought up something I was in my third year class, but I was still kind of young, and I didn't have the knowledge I do have. And I probably had like 4 or 5 people in this class that were saying, First Nations people have to, this the old adage of they have to get over it, talking about,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
all of these kinds of things. And I said, well, there's barriers that prevent them from achieving the same kind of a success. I said, and we were talking about certified coaches and certified trainers, and I said, well, you go to those northern communities. I was like, not even a northern community, a community like Meadow Lake, Saskatchewan, or Waterhen Lake, which isn't hard to get to. Paved roads up
Hmm.
until the res is like um, there's still not there wasn't solid certified coaches. There was a high turnover of, I remember even when I was in elementary, there's high turnover of our gym teachers and all that kind of stuff. So I was trying to talk about the barriers and what that meant, and they're
Hmm.
like, "Well, they have to get over it. They're, these are Saskatchewan agencies." But I still didn't feel prepared, and I remember specifically wanting to go back to that class, wanting to go back to that moment. But
And in that
I know
era, that era, that's when we were on the cusp of the internet. Like the internet was
absolutely
already there, but it was like we weren't using it to our full advantage of getting that information out there.
no. I kind of I
Because that was
learned.
04, you said, hey, 04, 05?
Oh, 04, yeah, we were kind of my first
Yeah.
couple of years of university, that was like the Facebook era. Like that's when we first
Well,
got
that's when I
on.
was in university. I was in
Yeah,
university from 02 to 06.
yeah,
And I remember we started talking about Google in like 05. We're like,
exactly.
yeah, you know what?
Exactly. People were
Yeah.
using beyond Google. I think everyone was using other search engines like Yahoo. There was all those other ones, but now Google, everyone's like Google
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah.
But nobody
But
says
yeah,
Bing it. But
yeah. But yeah, you're right. Like there was a lot of like that stereotypes, typical stereotypes of all that, a lot of ignorance of people not really knowing.
yeah, and I always I think when I was younger, I had a larger chip on my shoulder, right? Like quite often we're as First Nations people or First Nations and Métis people, we're looking for racism sometimes, right? We have our
Yeah.
dukes up, we're ready to go and be like pull out that race card. And I was very much like that. I had a chip on my shoulder. I wasn't going to take help from anyone. I was always going to try and pave my own way. Um, and I was ready. I was ready. Anybody who said anything that was a discriminatory thing or I felt was a stereotype, I was ready to go at it. But then I soon yeah, as you get older, you hopefully get mature and you start learning lessons. And I started doing I started learning and understanding that they didn't even teach treaties. They didn't teach anything about residential schools in the Saskatchewan curriculum. I don't think it was made mandatory until about 2009 to start teaching that in our actual provincial elementary and secondary schools. So
Hmm.
when you start to realize that people haven't had the opportunity to learn, and if it doesn't affect their overall daily life, then they don't understand. You know
Nope.
what I mean? Not
Yep.
that they can't be sympathetic of some of that stuff. And now with our phones and the technology, there's so much access to internet. If you have good internet connection, then you can learn more about it, and you can understand the history of our First Nations and Métis people, and that's an important piece. And now anybody who comes up to me, and it happens on the daily, not on the daily, but it happens to all of us as First Nations and Métis people, where somebody will say something about long hair, or somebody will say something about um, taxes or free education, and I don't. It used to make me upset, and now I just take it as an opportunity to try and share some information, and and
Hmm.
do it in a nice way, because I grew up in an era, and I'm sure similar to yours. I grew up in a town where a friend of mine, his Chief Cadmus Delorme, he took this class, and he was telling, I was listening to him, and he was talking about helium humor versus weighted humor. And I grew up in a town where weighted humor, and what that meant is there was a lot of busting balls, and there was a lot of like to a point where it was almost making fun of someone, right? If you have to be able to handle it. I wouldn't change any of that, but
Hmm.
that's kind of the culture I grew up in, is where we almost just picked on each other, right? and
Yeah.
and and there's good positive stuff that comes out of that, and we tease each other, and that's still some of the culture we use today. But now I try to be more cognizant of and be more aware of using more helium humor to lift people up and not bring them down, because quite often I grew up in a time where my friends, my family, aunties, uncles, all of that use a lot of weighted humor to make themselves feel good, where
Yeah.
they maybe have some insecurities, right? So
Yeah.
it takes some time. I'm not the best at it. I still bust balls with my friends on group chats and stuff like that, but it
We're
is
all,
what it
we're
is.
all learning in this day and age, man. We're all weary of everything that's going on around us. Hence, because of social media and the internet, it's kind of making us aware of everything. Even us people, as Indigenous people, we're more aware now what's out there, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's really I think it's an important piece to. I just did a Zoom call with another guy yesterday. His name is Skylar Anderson, and he was one of the producers for a play that was at the Globe Theater called "The Making of Treaty 4" last year. And him and his
Hmm.
brother, or him and his buddy, Pete Kite, who's from Makwasagagan or Loon Lake. They were talking about potentially doing a play, or coming up with an idea of a play on Indigenous men and Indigenous masculinity, and just talking about that, right? And I think that would be cool, and it's not something that is often talked about. Quite often you grow up and you hear negative connotations towards, boys don't cry, all that kind of stuff. You have to buck up, especially when you play hockey or you grow up in these small communities. It's kind of what's expected, but it's kind of cool to see young guys not being afraid to kind of go down that road and tell that story from an indigenous perspective. But
Yeah.
backing up a bit, going to school, definitely a challenge. A lot of times where a lot of times where I did struggle, I got RTD'd, actually, not out of the school but out of my major. And I wanted to quit.
Explain what RTD. Explain what RTD
Oh,
is.
required to discontinue. So
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to actually work for, don't laugh, but I want to work for the San Jose Sharks in like marketing. So I wanted to go into business marketing and do that part of it.
Man,
But I
just
was,
just saying that's a pretty cool ambition. You
that
don't
was,
know. You don't hear anyone saying I want to go to marketing to the
yeah,
San Jose Sharks. Like who
yeah,
who would actually literally say that? That's your dream job, right?
yeah. I
I'm just
wanted
saying,
to.
like who would literally say that? That's pretty cool.
That was the plan. That's what I wanted to do. I got into it, but I really struggled. I'm not a math guy at all, and I struggled in my
Oh, I
accounting
hear you there,
classes.
man.
I struggled in my accounting classes, and I took tutoring. I took tutoring on Saturdays to try and get it done. I took it 3 times and failed, unfortunately, 3 times. But
Hmm.
and there's times that I wanted to quit. There was lots of times that I wanted to quit, and I wanted to do well. And unfortunately, fortunately, I was able to. I had a really good advisor at the time, my student advisor, um, and they encouraged me to go to another major. And I took another major. And when I took a major in kinesiology in adapted physical activity, it's now called therapeutic rec. But
Hmm.
essentially, what adapted physical activity is, it was creating and adapting sports and recreation for people with like physical disabilities or intellectual disabilities.
Yeah.
And so my very first class, I remember I took this class and we were paired up with somebody from the Wascana Rehabilitation Center. So somebody that has potentially a physical disability. And we were paired up with them. We saw them once a week, and we had to come up with, we had to create sports programs and adapt it for that person so they can also participate. And me and this guy just hit it off, and yeah, we were buddies, and I look forward to doing that. Unfortunately, though, after I graduated, the there wasn't much of a market for working in that area or creating that, for creating sports and recreation programs for people with physical or intellectual disabilities. So it wasn't something that I could do full time. So after that, I went on and I applied and I worked at a place called Ranchero Society.
Oh yeah, I know Ranchero.
Yeah, I was there as their cultural coordinator, and I actually didn't know what it was. I applied and I saw the word ranch, and I'm just like what everybody else thinks, is I thought it was
It's a
literally a
ranch.
ranch. Yeah. And because I had a little tiny bit of experience working at my mushrooms pasture, like the tiniest amount of experience, I was like, I think I can work outside. I'll go check this ranch out.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what a cultural coordinator did or was, and I was 22, and I was like, okay, I'll check it out. And I learned quickly that it wasn't that. It was a youth treatment center, and essentially for youth that have been born in, probably about 95 or 90% of the youth has just been born into shitty circumstances. And it
Yeah.
really makes you take a second look. And I mentioned earlier that I grew up poor, but I was fortunate and privileged enough to be able to play hockey. My parents always had food. I always had a roof over my head. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
yeah, we struggled in some ways. We didn't have flashy cars or any of that kind of stuff, for the nicest clothes or nicest shoes. But at the end of the day, um, it really put my life. I really was able to take a step back, and I enjoyed that. So I spent 4.5 years there working with those kids, and that's what I liked about it the most, is I related to those young people, and seeing the potential in them kind of always brought my spirits up, and it always
Yeah.
made me feel good to see them. So yeah, I spent my first year out of university, I spent 4.5 years there, and then I've been all over. I've went to we have another question here. Do we answer live? I don't know how this
Yeah.
goes here.
Answer, man. Answer.
What's your favorite quote about success or going forward through adversity? Geez, Elville. My favorite quote. I don't have a favorite quote about that, but it's not even my quote. But I can say this, Elville. I heard this before, and I say this about the Indigenous population because I'm passionate about Indigenous people succeeding, and I always believe that when one of us succeed, all of us
All
succeed.
of us. Oh man, I like that. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
and
good.
that's not my quote. I think I heard that from a friend of mine many years ago. Her name's Chair Jean Baptiste, and always like that quote, and I always believe that. And I think that's something we see more and more is that there's less ego, and I like to see people succeed. I like to see. I don't care. I I want people to be happy, but I also just like to see
Mhm.
them succeed in whatever they're doing. If you're a janitor, be the happiest janitor that you can be. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you're a CEO of some organization, as long as you're happy and doing what you do, I think that's the most important thing. So I'm sure Elville had some cool things to say and some solid quotes, but
Yeah. Do you know
yeah,
who Gary Vaynerchuk is? Vaynerchuk?
I do know who
So
Gary
he's my
Vaynerchuk is.
hero, man. Like my hero. I love that dude. I love him.
Yeah, yeah.
Listen to him all the time, man. Like I'm a guy that listens to the motivation before and when I go to bed, and sometimes during the day. Well, right now I'm listening during the day because what else can you do? But
Right.
anyway, he's got that motivation, and he's always just pushing, and then he basically says, don't do stuff for the likes, but do it because you love it, right? Do it because it brings happiness. And it's true, man. Like, because he was saying, and I know other people that are in this spot too, that it doesn't matter if you're CEO making millions and millions. If you're hating your job, you're not. It's not good. It's not. You're not in a good life. But
Hmm.
if you're saying as a janitor or whatever, making $20,000, but you're happy as shit, you'd kind of want to. You know what I mean? It's all
Yep.
about happiness. And going back to your, what was that quote again? One, and then everyone
If
succeeds.
yeah, if one of us succeeds, then we all succeed, and I think that's a really cool quote, and it's
Yeah,
always stuck with me for years, and it's something I try to believe in, and I try to bring others up. It's cool to see the success of your friends that you went to school with or went to high school with, and now they're business owners, or they're doing
yeah,
something for their community, or they're helping out, or they're just happy. That's what I always think is like, and I'm not the one to say this as well, is that tomorrow I could walk outside and get hit by a bus, right? So why not try to live the best life I can? And yeah, man, you have to try things out. And I think the big thing that quite often, and you know this, you're probably familiar with this as well, is that living in isolated communities are communities that are away from large urban centers like Prince Albert, or farther away from, or Saskatoon or Regina, these larger cities. You can get comfortable there, right? You can get
yeah,
comfortable living in those communities
yep,
because there's no fear of being judged when you walk into a grocery store. There's no fear of being followed. You know what I
hmm,
mean? You know everyone. Um,
yeah,
you're not worried about what other people are doing or what they're saying about you, and that mindset kind of has to shift a bit. And you have to realize that most of the time, all of us are worried about ourselves. We're thinking about what our own hair looks like, what our jacket looks like. So
yep.
people aren't really taking the time to worry about other people, and go out there and live your life, and don't be afraid to try it. I've probably had, since I was 15, I don't know, 15, 16 different jobs, and I've had this recruitment mindset. Some jobs I've spent 4 months at, some jobs I worked at INAC for 4 months. That's all I could handle. And then I moved to another job at ISM for 8 months. And I just have this, I have no fear of, after I took that leap from the Rancherello Society,
Hmm.
I realized that who knows if the grass is going to be greener, but you know, I gotta take that leap. I gotta try it out. And I've always had
Yeah,
that mindset going in, is that if I'm not enjoying this, or if I don't feel like I'm learning or getting something out of it, or if I
yeah.
feel like things aren't changing here, the culture's not changing in this organization, I gotta go and try something else. And I've been fortunate that I've been in, with the Chamber of Commerce now since October, and yeah, it's been good. I have a solid team, and
We'll get to
just
where
more to
you are
come.
now, but I kind of want to back up. So you finished
Yeah,
your
of course.
degree. What did you get your degree in?
I actually got my degree in kinesiology. So my major was adapted physical activity, and I graduated October of 2009.
And then
And
did you? And then that's when you started jumping around Rancho.
I
When
went to Rancherello. Then after
how
that, I
did
went.
how did INAC get there? How did INAC become part of the picture? That's what it's like. Guy graduates with kinesiology, and all of a sudden he's at
uh,
INAC.
I've never worked in my field at all. It's been really it's all of my field has kind of done with Indigenous engagement, honestly. Like it's either been
Yeah.
with First Nations and Métis recruitment or whatever the case may be. So I'll give you a little bit of my resume, and I'll help you tell you how INAC came about. So I was working at Rancherlo. Right after the Rancherlo Society, I started working at the University of Regina as their Aboriginal co-op coordinator. So it was my job
Yeah.
to just help with work prep for any of the students. After a year I was at a career fair. I got recruited to go work at K Plus S Potash Canada. They were just opening up their potash mine in the south, and I was their First Nations and Métis recruiter. So it was my job to find journeyman pipe fitters and welders and all of that from all across Western Canada to try and bring them to K Plus S Potash. I spent 18 months there on contract. There was a bunch of recruiters. We were all on contract, and we were
Hmm.
staggered out. After that, I did a little bit of consulting work with George Gordon Urban Office for about a month. And then I saw a job at the City of Regina, cultural diversity, Indigenous relations advisor, or something like that. So I spent 2.5 years there. And I just got, I was at probably about the 2 year mark at the City of Regina. I was starting to feel the itch of my
Change.
the change needed to happen because I felt like I knew what my calendar looked like year to year. I knew what Monday looked like. I knew, I mean, January, February, all of that, all these same events that were
Status
in
quo
my
was
head.
coming into your life.
And I was starting to get jaded, and I was starting to get angry, and I was, I didn't like the internal communication that was happening there. And so I was like, I think I was at the point where I met this woman. She met me at one of these events. Her name was Cherie Moreau, and she's director of education or something like that for INAC in one of their departments. And
Hmm.
she told me to apply for this position in education, and I think I just kind of got romanced. I was ready to go anywhere, and she said, they were making big changes in the education funding agreement, all that kind of stuff. And so I thought, instead of always complaining about INAC, why not go in and infiltrate and learn about them before I continue to complain about INAC? And
Yeah.
I think it took me 6 weeks to realize I know what they're about. And then I was like, I started looking quick. But um to each their own. I still have people that I know that work there, and try to do a good job. And but there was some people that were just kind of sucked the life out of you when you walked in. You know what I mean? They just had this
Yeah.
negative mindset. And because I've moved around jobs too many times, I knew that I didn't want 4 months to turn into 4 years, to turn into 25 years, and just be jaded about the whole process. So when
Yeah.
I got out of there, I went to a job where I started as a project manager at ISM Canada, which is like a tech company, which was so random. I didn't actually even think I was going to get a call back.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
That's a
And
that's a different job from going from INAC.
yeah, it was different. I was oh, God, I would have worked anywhere. The other thing about it too, I have to back up, Nathan, is that because I think working is an important part of improving communication. And I also, when I worked at the University of Regina on the weekends, I worked at the casino because I thought that would be a good chance to check that out. I worked in the bank there for a few months, but those shift work from after a Friday night at like 6 o'clock, and then be done at 4:30 waiting for the poker players. That was hard. That was hard.
Yeah, no
Hard on the
kidding.
weekends, right? So I think I was there for about 6 months. But and then also when I was working at K Plus S, I worked at Sport Check on the weekends, just because I was always trying to add new. See, why not try things out? Um, I also got a side benefit was getting a discount at Sport Check, but for getting a chance to work with the public is something I always feel is important. Anybody who works in retail or anybody who works in customer service, that
Yeah.
you
Well,
you're
that's where I was
always.
gonna. I wanted
Yeah,
to
go ahead.
pause you there. Is like you said you were working on IS7 in technology or whatever, but doing these side jobs like the casino and working at a sports. Where'd you say sports check?
Yeah, Sport Check.
So at the same time you're making extra money, but at the same time you're gaining another skill while still doing your side hustle, as Elville says here. Hustle mindset. But it's true. Like uh, keep your portfolio. You got to grow your portfolio, man. And when you're young, grow it. Even when you're like my age, 42, you still can add on to your portfolio because you're literally people are working now till my mom. She's 74 years old. She still works,
Yeah,
just to work. But
sure.
it's always good to grow that portfolio, regardless of whatever it is. Eh?
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like even if it's a side job, side gig for extra money, you never know where that skill might take you later on in life.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree with you. And that was a part of it, was that working in retail, you run into the worst of the worst, right? And you run into the best of the best, but it really helps you control your emotions. Even
Yeah.
though they can come in and complain and it may not be your fault, you have to learn to control your emotions. Have to learn how to be a problem solver, think quick on your feet. All of those kinds of things are things you don't realize that you're just gaining as you go
Yeah.
at it. And that's why I wanted to try it. Even when I worked at the city of Regina, I forgot I worked at in the mall. I worked at a place called Foresight, and it was a place where you sold sunglasses and accessories and watches and all of these high end kind of stuff, like purses and all of that kind of stuff. And again, another place where it was a smaller store, and it's still there, but it forced you. You have to talk to you have to make commission sales if you're making commission or whatever the case may
Yeah.
be. You have to go out and be a hustler. You have to go out and talk to people. You have to be friendly, even if you're in a shitty mood, even if you had a shitty day or you just finished having getting into a fight, they're giving you a hard time, or you had a long day and a tough day of sleep. You still have to put a smile on your face. And I think I always envy people that I always look up to, and I always think about those people that do those extra little things to help add pad their resume and even to their own skills and mindset, just so they can get an understanding. Quite often, we have people that do a lot of complaining. Do you know what I mean? Complain about
Oh yeah.
shitty service or shitty this. And my thing is trying to take a step back and realize, okay, well, what's it like for that person? And that's why I've had those times in those jobs. And now as a director of Indigenous engagement, moving forward here as a with the
Yeah, let's
chapter.
get to there. Like, yeah, let's what's that all about? And tell us about it.
Yeah, so I'll give you a little bit of history of this position. So as a director of Indigenous engagement, this is a brand new position for the Saskatchewan Chamber of Commerce.
Mm-hmm.
I have to applaud them, because when I was at ISM, I was looking at other places, and I saw this job. A friend of mine told me to apply. I saw it on Twitter and I applied. But the summer of last year, that's when they were the Saskatchewan Chamber of Commerce is a nonprofit, and it's in charge of over 700 members, looking at businesses and advocating for businesses for the against the provincial government. So the goal, what they did is they actually created a task force
Mm-hmm.
um, of Indigenous business professionals and board members with the Saskatchewan Chamber of Commerce, and came up with what's called an Indigenous Engagement Charter. And then from there, they created this position of Director of Indigenous Engagement. So I started in October, and I've been there ever since. To touch on that charter, so what that charter is, the Indigenous Engagement Charter itself is basically an opportunity for organizations, Indigenous or non-Indigenous, to sign on to this Indigenous Engagement Charter. And then from there, if they're interested in what they'll do, is they'll create an Indigenous engagement strategy. So I'll help these organizations with their strategy. So if they want to focus on attracting or recruiting Indigenous people, if they want to focus on procurement, if they want to focus on just strictly engagement, whatever the case may be, we set these organizations who become signatories, our investors,
Mm-hmm.
with basically templates on how to engage Indigenous communities, both on and off reserve, both First Nations and Métis, and then just help them along the way, whether that be if they want to do Indigenous awareness training, or if they want to get into community engaged, if they want to go out and invest in community. We teach them ways to go and do that, because it's an important part of our economy in Saskatchewan. We've
Yeah.
you and I talked about this prior, but um, and I'll say it again: the Indigenous population is growing 4.5 or close to 5 times faster than the non-Indigenous, and that's a
Mm-hmm.
huge. That's those numbers aren't slowing down anytime soon. And not only is it the fastest growing, it's the youngest, where around, don't quote me, but around, I think 33% are under the age of 14 as well. So in Saskatchewan, if we'll say all of them are 14-year-olds, in 2 years, those people are eligible to work and contribute to the economy. So I feel like if we focus more on being inclusive and having inclusive work environments and changing your policies, your hiring policies, and actively looking at changing your culture in your organization, there's always
Yeah.
an opportunity. There's tons of that human resource of Indigenous people, and it's just growing.
I know a website where there's Indigenous people that are looking for work.
Hey, look at that.
Hey.
Go check it out. It's on our screen. So definitely something to go and check out. But I always say add to your skills. Don't be afraid to try anything out. And even if you're not, even if you feel like you're not qualified and you're intimidated, there's a lot of jobs I didn't get called back for. I applied for jobs at SAS Power, at the Public Service Commission. I applied for jobs everywhere. I
Oh
take it
yeah,
as a good thing if I don't get a call back, because the same mindset as Gary Vee is those losses, right, are things that you learn from. And
get
for
you
me, it's
hungrier
just
too
about
at the same
moving,
time.
right? It means that I just
Yeah.
have to step my game up, and that's a big part of it for me, is always trying to
Hmm.
add to the skills and understand and also remain humble in terms of I don't necessarily know everything, but when I start a job, I can do my best. I'm a hard worker, and I'll go out and do my best to try and learn it. So
And the
that's a
big
huge
thing is
part of it.
too is don't be status quo. This is what I tell people, man. Do
True.
not do not be status quo in life because it well, I'll backtrack. It's okay being status quo, but status quo is like you're going back to the city of or city of Regina. You already knew what your life was looking about like a year down the road, 2 years down the road. You said you knew your months way ahead of time and you already knew it was going to happen, right?
Yep.
Meetings, whatever, right? Some people like that. Some people like that that safety net, I guess you can say. Like they already know, you know what I mean? It's like they know their track. For me, on the other hand, I like this. I like this. Okay, I don't even know what's gonna happen tomorrow, man. Like let's take it on and let's kind of create. And then you got all these different ways you can go in life. You know what I mean? You never feel jaded as you said, like, but I just love I like pushing the other way where you just go for it, right? And then it brings back to you where you're saying you're applying for all these jobs, like you kind of up your game, like if you're not going to go the status quo way life and you want to go another route, you do got to pick up your socks a bit because that way is it's a lot harder, but the life you live in the long run is going to be a lot more what's the word fruitious.
Yeah, whatever. I wholeheartedly I agree with you again, man. No, and that's a part of it. That's a cool part of it, is not knowing, not knowing what it looks like, but that should motivate you to do
Hmm.
well, right? And go out there and try it. And I think that's a big thing. I'm not a, I try not to be too much of like a motivational speaker, but I do believe in working hard, and I think that's an important part of it, is that once you start, and I touched on this earlier, but once it becomes hard for you to get up in the morning, when you want to, and you see it as, I'm not looking forward to this, or I don't, then it's kind of, it kind of takes a little bit of your spirit away. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't ever want to be in those places, and I was in those places, in those jobs where I was at 4.5 years. Even I think at the 3 year part of being at the ranch, I was just young and I wasn't looking anywhere at the time. But then I just, I was getting jaded, and I don't
Hmm.
want to become jaded. I want to kind of have an open mind, and that was,
Yeah.
that I kind of jumped around and moved, and I think I found a good path and something I enjoy doing, and that's what I believe in. I like to see indigenous people do well, what we talked about. So
Yeah, man, that's the whole thing. And like I said, that's what IOPS is about is going out of bounds and grabbing people like yourself and all the past I guess I've had and bringing on that story and showing that, you know, even a lot of us growing up, some of us had some tough lives and some of us, different lives growing up. But we've all had to go through that adversity, of adjusting to a new life, either it's in the city or a new job or whatever, but trying to overcome a lot of obstacles to get where you are today, you know?
it's important, and I think that's the thing, is we talked about earlier too, Nathan, is that fear of being judged. What are they going
Yeah,
to
that's
think? Or I'm not good enough, right? My high school guidance counselor, I remember when applying for university, I didn't really think about university. My ex-wife at the time, my ex-wife now,
uh-oh,
she
uh-oh.
no, she was more of that university mindset. It's not bad. She was more of that university mindset, and she always had a plan at a young age. I didn't have anybody in front of me uh, that was leading that path. My mom was, already my mom, so I didn't see her as somebody who went to SIFC a long time ago. I didn't see any of that. So I felt that this guidance counselor, going back to her in high school, I remember sitting down in her office, and I just felt low. when she told me that, maybe university is not for you. She was looking at my grades weren't that good. I almost got kicked out of high school in grade 10. And she said,
Yeah.
looking at, here's your application, but I don't think university is the right path. Maybe you should think of trades. And at the time, and even now, I have lotion on my hands, Nathan. I can't work with my hands. I'm like red green, man. I know how to use the basics, but I can't. I can
Yeah.
type, but I'm one of those guys that will be a laborer, but not somebody who's going to be a carpenter who's refined and have those kinds of skills, right? So I just
Yeah.
knew at a young age that's not a skill set that I had or I was passionate about. So I was like, okay,
Hmm.
well, but that motivated me. I remember that conversation that motivated me, and I think about that often when I've talked to other people. Is that that guidance counselor? She was one of the first ones that I remember telling me that I wasn't good enough or it wasn't for me in so many words. And since then, I've been happy with how my career has gone. I've been happy with how I've gone on and got my degree, and I'm looking beyond that. I'm looking at potentially a lot of my friends and colleagues that have gone on and did their masters. I have a younger friend of mine that just got he's going for his PhD. So there's
Yeah.
always opportunity to keep learning and keep growing. And people are always going to tell you. There's always going to be people that
There's always
are
going to be the
yeah,
doubters in there that are just
and
going to
it's that
say you're no good.
you're no
But
good.
it's
And I think it has more to do with them, man. It has
them,
more to
yeah.
do
It's
with
it's
them.
them, it's them hating themselves where they're at and seeing what they could have did. Like especially the older ones. There's some older people that look at the younger generation and then they start complaining, but really what they're doing, and if they see a younger person kind of succeeding really quick and then they start coming down on them, they're thinking, man, shit, I could have been doing that, but I didn't at that young age. And why is that person succeeding so quick? You know what I mean? When, I didn't do, that's my just take at it because I've seen, even within our own people that we tend to, there's a lot of animosity for some reason when we should all be pushing each other, man. It's like, man, if I see some indigenous person succeeding, man, I like, even if I see other podcasters and I'm pushing them. I'm like, man, like go check this guy out, or or check this person out. There's actually another indigenous uh, job portal called a Mick. And then, man, I share their jobs and stuff. Hey, it's like, even though they're my competition, it's just like, man, if we all can push each other, to be better, man, we're all gonna be better in the long run instead of hating on each other sometimes like that.
Yeah, and I think that was popular in those the early 2000s of that mindset of there's just that Indian jealousy. You know what I mean? And we it's a very common experience we all have in our communities,
Hmm.
our home communities, our home fires with our families and stuff like that. Is that it was almost normalized behavior where you just expected that somebody was gonna say something about you, or somebody's like, oh, he's not that good, or he thinks he's better, or and I've heard it all myself. You know what I mean? Even from
Yeah,
my own family members telling me that, oh, he's because
that's where it comes the worst, Dave. That's the worst.
have no problems, taking you down a peg. And a part
Yeah,
of it is not really taking you down a peg, but you realize when you get older, you're like, that had more to do with them than it did about you. In the
yeah.
moment, obviously, you get defensive and you're like, F you too, and this and that. But at the end of the day, things are better now, obviously, with my family and stuff like that, and they're all happy and supportive. And I was fortunate in February pre-COVID here. I actually got invited to go speak at a youth conference, and I was humbled. And this young guy invited me, Robert Gladue, and I got to speak with a shout out to
Robert
my
Gladue, is that the young FSN chief, wasn't he, or something? Is that him?
no, he's a power singer and a rounda and singing composer. If you look him up,
Oh, sorry.
creator's
My
calling
phone.
you.
I forgot my
Just
phone was
kidding.
hooked up to this thing.
No, it's all good. But I went and spoke to the youth, and it was young people, and it was funny to see all these little young faces, and you don't know them, but who their mom and dad are based on what they look like. It was so
Yeah.
funny to see all these little people, and I just saw myself in all of them. And a shout out to my little auntie, or my cousin, Devin Fiddler. She's
Oh,
the
Devin's
owner.
your cousin.
Yeah, she's my
I'm,
maiden
I'm,
name. My mom's maiden name is Fiddler, so I'm part of the Fiddler family, and she
I
runs
guess she's from Flying Dust or
Waterhead.
Waterhead. Yeah.
Yeah, she's from Waterhead. Yeah.
Huh.
So
I'm
shout
trying
out
to
to
actually
her.
get her on the podcast here. So
reach out, I guess, on Facebook. I'm sure
Yeah.
she has little ones and she's busy trying to run her business in this
Yeah.
COVID life like the rest of us. But shout out to her because I always try my best to try and give her props. You know, opening up a store and starting her own line and empowering young Indigenous women. So that's
Yeah. No,
good
she's
on
pretty
her.
awesome what she's doing.
Yeah, for sure. And it was cool. I never saw her speak, right? You never your life gets busy, but listening to her speak, she's really polished for a young girl that was super shy that I knew at a young age who really didn't make eye contact or didn't talk. And she talked about this in her presentation as well. And to where
Hmm.
she is now, she's really impressive, and all the success to her and her team at She Native. So yeah,
Awesome. Yeah, well, I guess we'll kind of wrap it up here.
cool,
It's
man.
been an hour already. Um, I definitely want to have you on again, just to see you after COVID, and then we'll talk strictly now. Everyone kind of knows your background now. The next podcast, I think, would be good to just strictly talk Indigenous business and
Yeah,
what all
man,
that's gonna
absolutely.
look like. Because
We can for sure. That's not a problem. Yeah, there. I knew that there was a new announcement that came out. If you want to chat about that, but
yeah,
let's
you
hit
know
it.
what, man? Let's do it. What's today?
21st.
Tuesday? I'm so lost on the days.
Nobody
Why don't
knows.
we once we know what clarity is with all that money going on that's coming down, why don't we come next week and talk about it?
Yeah, no, that's good. Hopefully, we have some more news from the federal government of that
Yeah.
$307 million for Indigenous-owned businesses. But there's some
Yeah.
things that we need to talk about and how that affects a lot of those First Nations-owned companies. So we can
Yeah.
definitely talk about that next week. No problem, man.
So what I do, I'm gonna say goodbye to everybody. But what I do, hey, what I do, sorry, my little niece is right here, touching the
Yeah.
cam. So what I do usually on these segments now is what I do is get everyone to just say a piece, a words of inspiration, some motivation to the viewers, whoever's watching. And yeah, that's it. And we'll shut the show down. You good with that?
Yeah, sure.
All right. But I'm going to say goodbye to everyone. Thank you for tuning in. And I will catch you at the next podcast. Take it away there, Nick.
Oh, don't be afraid. I know that you're stuck in your comfort zone. Maybe you don't have the best connectivity at home, but at the end of the day, I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't take those chances to go out there. And yes, you're going to be judged. Yes, somebody's going to say something discriminatory about you, but it's how you react to those situations that's going to make you a better person. And there's going to be a lot of times where you're going to have some low days, but try your best to have good positive days and use the supports around you and your family. The things that motivate me are my family. They're the number one things that get me up in the morning, are my kids and my family and my partner Viviana. So thank you guys for having me. Don't quit, don't give up, and don't be afraid to get out of your comfort zone, because you'll feel a lot better going on. So thank you.